I'll speak to Wolfgang Pusztai, who's a security policy and defense analyst. He's also a former defense attache for Austria, joining us from Vienna this hour. Thanks so much for your time. So as you heard our correspondent in Iran saying, there are reports that seem to suggest that Washington, Iran and Oman may be nearing an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think a deal is genuinely within reach, or is it too early to say? And of course, with the Strait remaining a critical flashpoint, how do you assess the risk of renewed escalation?
It is certainly too early to say if they will come to an agreement today or tomorrow, but it might very well be the case. What they are doing right now is working on a clarification on some points of the very vague memorandum of understanding, which has actually contributed to the renewed outbreak of violence. If the agreement between Tehran and Oman recognizes that there is no obligation for tolls, there is only the possibility to charge some fees for maritime services and maybe for environmental protection, this might very well be accepted by the Americans. If they impose tolls or a high amount of fees, which is clearly against the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, the Americans would certainly reject this. This is also not only because of the situation at the Strait of Hormuz, because this might also be used as a precedent for other maritime choke points. And this is what the Americans certainly do not want to see.
Well, look, I mean, speaking of the Americans, and Trump himself has been sending a series of messages that at times appear contradictory, right? On the one hand, he threatens massive strikes if Tehran doesn't reach an agreement, and then he cites progress in talks. Do you see all of this as a deliberate move to create confusion, or what's going on here?
Doreen, you are perfectly right. This is probably part of the American information warfare against Iran. President Trump talks to three different audiences. He's talking first and foremost to to the Republican voters back home. For them, he wants to be the strong man. This is the reason for his strong announcements of strikes and so on, and of successful deals. He is talking to the international audience, to us, to show that he is working on this. And probably right now, most important, he is talking to the Iranians. And for them, he wants to intensify the so-called fog of war. He wants to keep them in uncertainty about his next moves. So for us, it's important not to take each and any statement of the President of the United States literally, but to assess the context.
And you've argued that economic pressure remains Washington's most effective tool against Iran, and that sanctions are costing Iran an estimated $200 to $250 million a day in lost oil revenue. So going by that, if sanctions are indeed inflicting significant economic costs, is there any evidence that they're actually changing Tehran's strategic calculations right now?
I guess this is the case because, as I've heard, the Iranians are pushing very hard that in any kind of agreement with the United States, they will be allowed to export oil once again. This is for their economy of critical importance. As you have correctly explained, they're losing about up to 250 million US dollars per day. And this is quite a lot of money, keeping in mind that the Iranian annual GDP last year was just about 360 billion US dollars. And they are losing more than at about 7.5 billion per month. So this is certainly the sharpest sword. And it needs to be seen if, after there is an eventual agreement between Iran and Oman about the Strait of Hormuz, that is accepted, also that can be accepted also by the United States and the other major global economic shipping powers, then we need to see how this is transmitted into an overall agreement to solve the conflict. An opening of the Strait of Hormuz is certainly an important step, but it doesn't solve the overall conflict.
Look, but if this conflict does continue, which side is a better place to sustain the pressure? And what do you think success looks like for each side?
Actually, what we see right now is a clash of wills, a clear clash of wills. Will Iran be able to withstand the American sanctions and especially the blockade long enough until President Trump loses his interest or needs to give up his campaign against Iran for any other reasons? Possibly because he loses the support of Congress, or maybe the right word is not support, let's say the acceptance or tolerance of Congress for his war. So we will see who has the longer breath, who is longer to sustain his position. How might a success for Iran look like? A success for Iran would look like that they're able to continue with their nuclear program, which is certainly for them a key element to dominate the Middle East and also to threaten Israel, and if they're able to continue their control over the Strait of Hormuz. And as they intend to do, to exert some tolls from all the ships passing through. What would be a success for the United States? Some say if the Strait of Hormuz, this is already a success. I doubt it, because the Strait of Hormuz was already open before this war started. So a real success for the United States would not be only an open Strait of Hormuz, but would be some kind of verifiable termination of Iran's nuclear program. But I would say this is not yet on the horizon.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Wolfgang Pusztai, a security policy and defense analyst, you're joining us from Vienna this hour. Thank you.